and evolutionary emergence arriving right on time. Welcome people online who's watching this presentation and people in the future who will be watching it on tape. So I asked the question, what effect might HSPs have upon accelerating societal growth to achieve the 10% tipping point into second tier awareness? Now it's interesting, Ken said this morning, we're already there at 10% of second tier. But I still believe that these people are going to accelerate it, whether they're in integral or not. And until this morning, he was saying that 5% of people have reached the second tier when we're talking on spiral dynamics, where they're actually at the tier level of development. And the 10% has always historically been the tipping point. So those of you old enough to remember the 60s, when we hit 10% green, and the profound effect it had upon feminism, environmentalism, racial issues, it was enormous. And then we had a conservative backlash. This next one's going to be even more huge, but we're going to need people like you to interpret it as it goes along. It's estimated percent of the population with HSP is 20%, which is huge. 1 in 5 people have it. And are HSPs ready to share their gift? And are they aware of the vital role they could play? No. They're neither ready or aware. Do you recognize this graphic from Airplane? He's sweating profusely. Here's a slide where 40% of folks I find that come in with generalized anxiety disorder, with or without panic attacks, are actually HSP. And to drug them without the awareness that these people clean up nicely. When I can bring them down and quiet them, that's why I learned that I was telling Betsy a half hour ago, is in clinical practice, just getting that body to quiet, God Almighty. When they clean up, they do really well, which I'll be showing you in a moment. So what is HSP? It's people with high levels of emotional sensitivity. They have strong reactivity to both internal and external stimuli, like pain, light, noise. When I walk into an Italian restaurant, before I go in there, I've got to quiet, because they're yelling all the time. And I'll never forget being in Italy on the train, and I'm going to my wife, God, they don't stop yelling. So learning how to regulate how much comes in is crucial. They have a very complex inner life because they feel everything, not just auditory, on the visceral level, there's thought to be 26 senses, not the 5 you're taught in biology, 26 types of different senses. Here's a sine qua non. They need a lot of alone time to recover. Whenever I hear that, I'm like, you better take the HSP questionnaire. And what they're doing is it's only being alone where they can slow it all down. How many here think they're HSP? I thought you all were going to show up for this. And how many of you actually taken the questionnaire? Okay, so I'm going to show you where you can take it, because it's important to see what area you're really overloaded in. There's high sensitivity to other people's opinions, which isn't always good. And they deeply feel others' trauma or violence. So one of my clients told me she used to grieve if she saw a dead animal in the road. That's not good. That's not having the emotional discipline. And then I love the one my daughter, who's HSP as ever, and she's a psychologist now, and she's going to take over my practice, which I feel so grateful to do. But I'll never forget, she said to me when she was in her postdoc, "Hey, Dad, I threw away last year's schedule, and I felt bad for it." She goes, "How HSP is that?" Isn't it amazing? As a child, when I changed the toilet seat and one of the toilets in our house, she felt bad for the toilet seat, which I don't let her forget. So the problem with HSP, if you don't know you have it, and you haven't learned centering, quieting things, it's the fire hose of how everything hits you. It's interesting. If I didn't volunteer, one second, for this talk, I was going to be at San Diego Psychological Association presenting to other psychologists. How do you identify these people? And how do you help them? Because to approach it just as generalizing anxiety and that trauma or developmental delay is an absolute waste. Real quick.
Yeah, I was just wondering, is this biological, like genetics, or is it cultural?
Very good. The comprehensive answer we don't know. But there's a researcher at UCSB whose name is escaping me, but she did imaging of the brain, and she found the differences in the image of people with and without HSP brains. So we think it's biological. And just through observation, I know if somebody's HSP, there's a good chance one of their children are going to be too. Have you noticed that? Yeah. So I think it's biological, but we really don't know yet. So here's the HSP questionnaire, and I put it on my academia.edu webpage. And at the end of the talk, I'll leave this up when we have time for Q&A, so that you can write it down. And the beauty of this questionnaire online is you can score it yourself and then put it in all the categories with the interpretation, and I'll say more. So this will be at the end, you can see it if you don't get it right now. Okay, these are the subcategories of when I did this study looking at HSP among integralists, I asked, are there more HSPs among integralists? No. Are they stronger in HSP? Yes. But one of the things I use is May's work in South Africa. He did a factor analysis of the instrument and came up with these 5 subcategories I'm going to touch on real quick. And I loved it because this attracts what I see at the clinical level, and it offers more detail and what do you need to correct and what tends to get out of control, as we talk about integrating this. So here it is. So these are the 5 subcategories you notice, and on this next slide, I have neural sensitivity on top. And what I'm saying here is that that's neural sensitivity where the noise is too loud. If my wife drops a jar in the sink at night, I'm like, and then I got to go, oh God, shh, shh. She always goes, sorry. Because it just frazzles me for a moment, that level of it. So it's the neural sensitivity that seems to set it off. And then there's a propensity to overwhelm. Careful processing is a compensatory behavior because you hate to be wrong. You're always looking to be right because you can't stand criticism of other people. And that's not good because then it starts to approach perfectionism. And then the final, when you're not doing really well and you're isolating, you realize you're not reacting like other people, you tend to self-talk in a very negative way. You have a negative affect. And that isn't what we want. You have a gift, but you can't mail it in. You've got to get on top of this and you run the HSP so it serves you, it doesn't run you, which is easier said than done. The only positive thing in this scale I find disappointing is the aesthetic sensitivity. You want all of that you can get because you're kind of sublimating that capacity into seeing the beauty. So if you can walk through life and go, God, that feels good, then you're putting that energy in a place that helps and you're regulating your state. So I wish there was more on this scale, but we got to use other measures in order to do that. But that's what I'm seeing at a clinical level. The beauty of the HSP people is they can open up space, space, with that resonant energy, and they can amplify the field. Real quick story. One of my women that's HSP and her son at 5-year-old has it. He's up on stage singing this song, Glorious. You ever hear that? And he's staring at his mother while he's singing it, enjoying the flow. And his mother's crying profusely because it just felt so connecting. And I remember she brought him in for a session, and I'm like, oh my God, this kid. Because he's just looking at me, and he's like, and I'm like, I can't wait to see this kid when he gets older. He's going to be amazing. They can be outstanding in helping others to develop or discover their state abilities, providing they don't look like a mess, providing they don't have too much anxiety. They know and comprehend complex emotional quotient information beyond their training. They know things. Metaphysically, I have no idea how that works. Metaphysically, I understand the thought. Empirically, I have no idea how it works. Why do they know things? And there's a lot of metaphysical speculation how that comes to pass. They do great in therapy because they got so much subtle energy, providing we can turn down the fire hose. And their attunement and impact can be enormously powerful. Another client, she's in San Francisco. She's walking down the street, and these construction workers are teasing a homeless man who's crying and screaming at them. And she walks up to him and goes, "You're not who they say you are. You're not who they say you are." And he's stunned by the connection. He just stares at her, stops crying, and walks away. We wondered, what changes did you make in him in doing that? But can you feel that, her doing that? And she's a little woman. I'm like, holy crap, you actually did that. So I love that, when they show up that way. One more I want to tell you about, Julie. Both these people I said, you got to let me share these stories. People need them. Julie's an ER physician with great state abilities. She has her HSP under control. I can feel her all the time in the waiting room. And she's doing a night shift. And a trauma case comes in, a guy. And he's crying, he's afraid he's gonna die. She walks up to him, grabs his face. I got you, you're all right. I'm gonna get you through this. And the effect it has on the whole emergency department and everybody working with her is enormous. Because they feel her just settling it all down. So his crying turns soft and he's reassured. And there's many stories like that. Alcoholics coming in, I want you to show me your chip when you get to 60 days. Do you hear me? Isn't that wonderful? That type of application makes changes in the world. That's why I'm so excited about these people. I swear they're an evolutionary emergence that we haven't identified yet. They are going to be leaders in what they do. I already said this, HSPs do have higher HSP scores. Here's the study I ran. On that website, you can, if you want to see the study, you can read about it there. Is this arriving on time to move the collectedness from nation-centric to world-centric awareness? It is, because the more we feel the resonance, I don't know what they're doing here, but you can feel them in resonance. I'm calling it external resonance because it's something upstage is my envisionment of it. And they're reacting to it collectively. They're not turning to each other. The trick is, can you hold it while you're looking at somebody? Take an intimate couple, they're the hardest people in the world to keep them focused there. I always find that interesting. Couples always say they want to be closer, but when I open that moment, the overexposure causes them, shows up in their physiology. I'll never forget the guy I asked to do it, look at his wife for 30 seconds, don't smile. He goes, no, don't make me do that. And he was levitating on the couch. This is internal resonance. How am I doing time-wise?
1:30.
I got 5 minutes?
You're fine. I got 15 more.
So what do I want you to see here? This is internal resonance. This is Hillen from Germany and Jeremy, I forget where Jeremy's from. And I love Hillen. And you can feel them holding the energy as they're dancing, can't you? I love HSPs. And look at the effect on him, and on him. See how it creates a field? That's your superpower. We need you out in the world. People don't need to be cognizant of it. Elsie, what's her name? Maybe you remember this when I say it. People won't remember what you say. They'll remember how you made them feel. Thank you. Isn't that brilliant? That's your superpower. That's what you're changing in people in doing this. This is the interface with couples. I started in HSP because I was looking at these higher stages of development. This is a couple doing real well, relational, green, postmodernism. See how everything lines up? This paper, you can read about it. That's on the website too. But it comes out of the all four quadrant, couples line of development. But getting people from here to there and being able to handle that resonance, 5 minutes, thank you. Being able to handle that resonance in my couples. And sometimes, when they're pretty healthy, I'll open it for them. Like, I'll open it with their husband. I'll get them in that space. And then I'll say, take over. Don't lose them. Just so they know what lies ahead. Because at first love, you're not living in the 15% deficit. You're living in the 85% abundance. I always find that amazing. A couple can do 85% well. It's the 15% wrong that defines how they feel about their marriage. Now, there's some couples that do a lot more than 15% wrong. I'm talking about the relatively healthy ones. But in order to get out of relational and into first love, you've got to live in gratitude. So I had my knee replaced last December. And the first 2 or 3 weeks, the pain. And my wife got me through that whenever I want to feel gratitude, I just got to think about how pathetic I was on my walker and couldn't get anything done, and I was in so much pain. And I could just feel the gratitude. But that's the trick. That's how you get up into this, because you're dealing with the exposure and it's not overwhelming you. At Spiritual Love up here, they have this down pat. They're going, bring it on. What do you see? And they're traversing the landscape unbelievably. It's an ongoing dialogue. I don't think I've ever seen a couple like that. I've seen people floating into first love, but it takes a lot of interior awareness, as Roger Walsh said, so that when you run into something you didn't see, you're not overreacting, you're not contracting. But the HSPs have an inside track on this. So here's the difference between first and spiritual love. I'll let you read that online. And here's a goal. Can we identify children who have HSP before they become symptomatic? That's the trick. And there is a child assessment question out there that the parent takes. Julie's daughter, Julie is the ER physician's daughter, and at 7 years old, she went up to her daughter, said, look in my eyes. And at first the daughter was squeamish. Mom, this is weird. Then the daughter started saying, Mom, can we do that again? Now the daughter at 8 is going up to Dad and going, Dad, can you feel me? And Dad isn't quite HSP, but he's pretty high. This is continuous. It's not static data, it's continuous. And he's like just relishing in his daughter opening that space. What are these people going to look like at our age? They are going to be running conferences way beyond what we're capable of. So it's a wonderful thing that's happening. So is it an evolutionary emergence arriving right on time? Yes. I don't think anyone planned this. Were there HSP people 200 or 300 years ago? I don't know. I don't know. I got a feeling it's not perfectly genes. It's epigenetic, the interface between environment and genes. So here it is. I think we have time for how many questions? I got 1 minute. Any quick questions? Shoot.
How does this relate to introversion, extroversion?
Well, if you're asking that question, I think you already know. The introverts are probably high candidates for HSP because they need that isolation. But I'm not aware of data that really correlates with that. There may be a study on that, but I don't know. One more question? Shoot.
How many studies have been done on children on the spectrum in terms of HSP?
Oh, that's a very good question.
Because it's on such an increase over
Yep.
the last 15 years.
See, again, I don't know. And I do think people are looking at that, the interface. Just the fact that they turn into spectrum disorder, I do think even ADD's on the spectrum, that there's a big, long cognitive thing that we just don't understand yet. One more quick. Yep.
Kind of along that same line about are you seeing any correlation with the Enneagram, with the HSPs, certain type?
See, again, I don't know. Do you have a speculation what Enneagram number is a candidate for more?
So I don't know. I just wondered if the sevens. But yeah, I guess the other part of what I'm thinking is, this is my theory, but I guess I'm just going to say it. The higher vibration that I'm having to get used to, it's like as I open up, the vibration is so much higher. I'm expanding willingly into it. And I thought, I wonder if this is why so many of the younger people who seem already operating at a higher vibration. Maybe that's why it's being experienced as anxiety, when actually it's just a matter of going there and relaxing there.
Exactly. That's exactly the point, is learning how to handle that and then don't let it get fire hosed. So are the next speakers here?
They're not, and you actually have 4 minutes until 1:45.
Okay. But the next speakers aren't here? So maybe I can run over a little bit. Shoot.
There was a term, indigo children, that was used a while back, and how does that relate to HSP?
You know, I don't, you do have to define the term for me.
These were kind of children that were very advanced. They sort of knew things ahead of their timing. They were kind of spiritual just right out of the gate,
Yeah.
and had some powers and capabilities that normal kids don't have.
Yeah, I suspect that, remember, HSP wasn't online way back, and I suspect that's what it was. And, you know, the bigger category is called sensory processing sensitivity, sensory senses. And the more they nuance this and try to figure it out, there's just a lot here. But when I started getting into this literature, because what I was doing on the clinical level, and I started realizing, oh my God, these people are great for integral. Because, so when I get a client that's pretty healthy, I invite them into these circles. Because it's just, these communities are so good for them. So, any more questions? Joel, wait for the microphone. We want to be kind to the people online.
There you go. It seems like there's some overlap here for empaths who seem to kind of take on other people's emotions. And I guess just clinically, I'm kind of wondering, I sometimes teasingly say, wow, that's too much of a good thing. It's almost too much empathy, you know? 'Cause
Absolutely.
so is there any kind of approaches when you do see somebody who is just struggling, like, you know, you see that dead animal on the side of the road and you're in mourning. Do you have any kind of approach to those people?
So that's a really good question. That's what I'm going to do when I meet with the shrinks, is you've got to learn how to center. And what centering means, I always teach people, I know what state I'm in. Are you the next presenters? They are. I know how you're approaching me. I decide how I'm going to react. And you can hear some of Keegan in that, right? Not making it subject, making it object. Because you can't mail that in. You either get control of that, or this will define your day, day in and out. And it is a gift, but you've got to learn how do I show up in the world? Like, even doing this conference, Bensei told me, he said, Tom, emceeing this, the day of it is going to come on like a train. And boy, he did it, because I wanted to talk to different people. People were asking me questions. He said, stay focused. So I had to calm everything down as best I could, you know, with my own anxiety about coming up here. But it was a challenge. So that's the trick, and that's part of the reason, Joel, I want to get to the shrinks, that this has been on the books for a while to do with it, because there's a lot of wasted potential. Thank you very much, and thank you for being HSP.